Most people quit at the exact moment they think they've reached their limit. Not because they have nothing left, but because they believe the voice that says they don't. That voice is fast. It arrives before the pain does. It sounds like reason. It sounds like self-preservation. And almost every person alive has learned to obey it without question. There's a specific point in every hard thing, a race, a project, a year, where the mind manufactures an exit, a perfectly logical reason to stop. And the terrifying truth is that most people never find out what was waiting on the other side of that moment. One man made it his life's work to cross that line, over and over again, until crossing it became the only identity he knew. His name is David Goggins. In 1999, David Goggins weighed 297 pounds. He was working as a pest control technician in Indiana, spraying cockroaches in restaurant kitchens at night, alone, with no trajectory and no plan. He had failed the Air Force SEER training. He had accumulated debt. By his own account, he was eating chocolate cake at 2 in the morning and watching television as his life dissolved around him. He was 24 years old. Then, almost by accident, he saw a television program about Navy SEAL Hell Week. 6 days of continuous physical and psychological punishment with less than 4 hours of sleep total. The dropout rate hovers around 75 to 80%. Most candidates who attempt it are already elite athletes. Goggins was none of those things. He decided he would become a SEAL. In under 3 months, he lost 106 pounds. He ran for the first time in years, bleeding through his shoes, with no background in distance running. He applied for Bud/S and entered Hell Week not once, but 3 times. The first attempt ended with a stress fracture and hypothermia. The second with pneumonia and broken kneecaps. On the third attempt, in 2001, he graduated. What made the difference wasn't talent, it wasn't physical superiority. Every man around him had more of both. What made the difference was a single brutal method he developed inside his own mind. One that had nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with how discipline is actually constructed. What Goggins discovered wasn't how to endure pain. It was how to build a system inside the mind that makes quitting structurally impossible. You've felt it before. That specific exhaustion that isn't really physical. Where your body still has something left, but your mind has already written the ending. You're 3 weeks into a new routine and the initial fire is gone. You're 6 months into something hard and the results aren't visible yet. You're in the middle of the most difficult thing you've ever attempted and some part of you, calm, rational, convincing, begins to negotiate. It tells you that you've done enough, that today is an exception, that rest is wisdom, that you can restart tomorrow. And the cruelest part isn't that the voice lies. It's that the voice is often partially right. You are tired. It has been hard. You have earned something. The mind doesn't manufacture pure fiction. It manufactures persuasive half-truths at the precise moment your resistance is lowest. Most people aren't defeated by their weaknesses. They're defeated by the sophistication of their own internal negotiation. By how intelligent the argument for stopping sounds at the exact moment stopping would cost them everything. What Goggins built, and what he documented with precise, replicable detail, is a discipline system. Not motivation. Not willpower in the conventional sense. A structural method for making the decision to continue before the moment of collapse arrives. He called one core component the cookie jar. Discipline, as Goggins defines it through practice, is not the absence of weakness. It is a pre-constructed architecture that operates independent of how you feel in any given moment. It doesn't ask whether you want to continue. It has already answered that question. Here is how it works. The brain under stress is not neutral. It is actively searching for evidence that stopping is justified. This is not weakness, it is biology. The nervous system is wired to conserve. Under physical or psychological pressure, the mind begins to audit your history, looking for reasons the current effort is unreasonable. Goggins reversed the audit. The cookie jar is a deliberately constructed mental inventory of every hard thing you have already survived. Every moment you thought you couldn't continue and did. Every version of yourself that showed up when it had every reason not to. You build this inventory in advance, not in the moment of crisis, but before it, so that when the internal negotiation begins, you already have a counter-argument that isn't abstract. It works because it speaks the mind's own language. The brain responds to evidence. When it searches for proof that you should stop, you give it proof that you never have. The architecture of discipline in this model is not about suppressing the voice. It is about having already answered it. During the 2006 Badwater Ultramarathon, 135 miles through Death Valley in July with temperatures exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit, Goggins developed stress fractures in his feet by mile 70. His feet blistered so severely that a single step required draining fluid with a safety pin before continuing. He did not stop. He did not stop because the decision had already been made before the race began. When his body began the audit, cataloging every reason the next mile was medically irrational, the cookie jar was already full. Goggins had survived Hell Week 3 times. He had passed SEER training. He had run through injury before. The evidence for continuing was built into the system before the crisis arrived. He finished the race. He came in 5th place. But there was a moment, documented in his own words, where the system nearly broke. Not at Badwater. Earlier, during his 3rd attempt at Hell Week, after 2 previous failures that left him with pneumonia and fractures, Goggins entered the water for a night evolution, a training exercise conducted in the freezing Pacific Ocean, and his body began shutting down. His core temperature dropped. He lost control of his physical coordination. He was pulled from the water by the medical team. He was given a choice: stop, and the decision would be medically justified. No one would question it. He had already proven something. For a moment, the negotiation was real. The exit was clean. The voice had the strongest argument it had ever made. Not just comfort, but survival. He chose to return to the water. Not because the fear was gone, not because the pain was gone, but because somewhere in the architecture he had built, the answer to that question had already been decided. The system held. Not because he was beyond breaking, but because discipline, at its core, is a decision made in advance. He graduated. But this wasn't limited to one moment in Goggins' life. The same principle showed up again, in a completely different context, and the pattern it reveals is impossible to ignore. By 2013, David Goggins had already done what no rational observer would have predicted. He had become a Navy SEAL. He had completed Army Ranger School. He had finished ultramarathons across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. His identity was established. His reputation was real. He had, by any external measure, already won. And then he attempted to break the Guinness World Record for pull-ups in 24 hours, targeting 4,030 repetitions. This context matters. He wasn't a desperate man trying to escape an invisible life. He was a celebrated man with nothing to prove, standing in front of a pull-up bar at a shopping center in San Diego, attempting something that would cost him months of recovery regardless of the outcome. By hour 17, his hands had torn completely open. The skin was gone. Each repetition was pulling against exposed tissue. The medical logic for stopping was, again, airtight. He stopped at 2,565. He did not count it. He did not accept it. He did not reframe the number as honorable progress. He trained for 6 months, returned to the record attempt, and completed 4,030 pull-ups, setting the world record. What this second moment reveals is something the first moment only suggested. The discipline system Goggins built was never about proving something to an external world watching him fail. It was never contingent on circumstances being desperate enough to justify the effort. It operated identically whether he was an unknown man with nothing to his name or a documented figure with every reason to rest. The cookie jar doesn't distinguish between your first hard thing and your 100th. The architecture doesn't care what you've already survived. It asks the same question every time, and it already has the answer. That is what separates discipline as a system from discipline as a performance. One requires an audience. The other requires nothing but the decision made in advance. Now that you understand what this principle is, how Goggins lived it, and why it showed up in every chapter of his life, the real question is what you do with it starting today. Take 20 minutes this week, not during a hard moment, but before one arrives. Write down every difficult thing you have already survived, not the victories, the moments where the exit was real and you didn't take it. Be specific. Dates, circumstances, what the voice said, what you did instead. This is not a gratitude exercise. It is an inventory of evidence that your discipline architecture will draw from when the negotiation begins. The more specific the entries, the more effectively they counter the argument for stopping. The mind that tries to stop you is consistent. It uses the same arguments in the same order every time. This week, when you encounter resistance, in training, in work, in anything that costs you something, write down exactly what the internal voice says. The precise wording, the specific justification. Once you can see the pattern clearly, it loses the element of surprise. Discipline becomes easier not when the voice disappears, but when you recognize it so precisely that it no longer sounds like reason. Pick one area of your life where you consistently negotiate with yourself. Not the hardest one, the most consistent one. Define in writing what the non-negotiable version of that commitment looks like. Not a goal, a decision that has already been made. A line that exists before the moment of collapse arrives. The discipline system doesn't operate in the moment of crisis. It operates in the quiet moment before, when you're still rational enough to answer the question honestly. If you want to go deeper into everything we covered today, one book changed the way I understand discipline completely. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I'll leave the link in the description. The voice that tells you to stop is not your enemy. It is the last wall between who you are and who you were built to become. Every person who has ever done something rare has heard it. The ones who crossed the line didn't silence it. They just stopped waiting for it to go away before they moved. If this is the kind of content that makes you think differently, subscribe and hit the like button. It's the simplest way to help this channel grow and reach people who need to hear this. What's the one hard thing your mind has been negotiating you out of? And what does the voice tell you to justify stopping? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. See you in the next one.